All right, folks, thank you for joining in on the East to West Hunts podcast. Today, we're going to talk to Gideon Montgomery. He is a fellow Michigander here since I'm in Michigan, and I have had the joy of following him along on a lot of different stories. What I would say is a multi-state on a lot of out-of-state expeditions or experiences. Thought this would be fun to talk about out-of-state hunting and I'd say 2024 and 2025 plans that you have going on. But Gideon, let me hand it to you. Like, tell us a little bit more about you and your adventures that you've been having.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, thanks for having me on, Alex. So I guess to kind of tee it up, I've only been hunting since I was about 21. I'm 29 now. So I've got 8 years of experience. Didn't grow up in a hunting family. Certainly was exposed to it, but this wasn't something I was taught, something I was really even like I didn't really get to participate in until I was, well into adulthood. I started dabbling in it myself. But it really did change my life. I got into hunting when I was 21, and it was whitetail hunting for the first year. But within the first year of me killing my first doe, I started going out west hunting elk, mule deer, doing all of that completely just DIY, watching YouTube, all that type of things. Eventually, it kind of moved the trajectory of my life to like where I live, what my career is now. I work in the public conservation sector now. Yeah, man, I hunt all over the country, not necessarily with the same goals as everybody else. No, yep, I've just gotten addicted to the adventure. I've gotten addicted to public land, and yeah, that's what I'm all about. Like I pretty much all my vacation time, all my spare time, I'm out there in the woods somewhere.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, you definitely have a passion for it, man. I can feel it in all of your posts and stuff that you're doing. So it's really really cool, and I'm happy to have you on here. So thanks for coming on. This is great.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, so you mentioned you're a first gen hunter, so that's
hmm
kind of cool. Your first generation deal. What drew your interest in it in the first place?
It was kind of hilarious, really. Like I was, between 19, 18 to 21. I went to college. I tried a couple different degrees. Things weren't working out. I was just like kind of working in the trades, just partying, not doing anything productive with my time. And hilarious enough, I remember I was at home, I was just having a beer, and I was on Netflix. And this is probably how a lot of people got into hunting, but maybe they didn't stick with it. But it was the episode of Meat Eater when he's in Alaska and they're hunting the moose, right? It was like one of the first seasons that came on Netflix. And I'm kind of buzzing and I'm watching this dude like calling this moose and he shoots it over the river. And I'm just like, damn, like, like I used to go fishing when I was a kid. That does seem like it seems like an interesting way to spend your time. You know what I mean? And so literally like the next week I went fishing for the first time in like 5, 6 years, right? And then after that, it just kind of spitballed. I was like, well, I'm gonna try going hunting. And then I didn't know what I was doing. I had like some old bow I got out of my grandpa's basement. The string was older than me. I was like threw some Walmart arrows on there. I was like, yeah, let it rip. I never killed anything with that bow.
All
So it
right, all
never,
right.
yeah, it was not gonna happen. Probably for the best. Probably would have blown up on me or something. But that's what kind of like gave me like the spark to get into it. But really, like it was just getting back outside and I was connecting with something that like didn't just it didn't just speak to me, but it was like it just felt like a productive use of my time. Like really, like there's a lot of young men that get out of like high school and they're in college and like they're chasing women and trash, doing stuff they're not supposed to be doing. And like I feel like hunting was like kind of a good outlet that really came into my life and gave me something to do.
Yeah, I wonder how many other hunters out there could resonate with that. I'm assuming there's a lot because I don't know. It was a couple episodes ago, but I was talking about how I think like hunting's been life changing for me. You talking about that sounds very similar. Like, it's kind of shaped where you are now, you know. So it's pretty cool. It's cool to hear what the outdoors and nature and what I think is some stuff that's within us gets drawn back out, you know, from what we have in our societal norms per se now.
Yeah. No.
so so as I mentioned, I've kind of followed you along for a while, but I know you were wildlife managing at some point, so you've had some career stuff outdoors as well, and then now you're working for DNR. So were you kind of seeking that same realm as far as like work goes too, just being in the outdoors?
Well, really, I mean, this is very kind of odd for the field because most people don't fall into this. You have to be very intentional.
Yeah.
It was not long after COVID, I actually landed a job with doing private sector conservation, working for like a contractor, essentially taking contracts for the state or generally kind of wealthier landowners, or even just maybe some people who want some food plots on their property. Well, I
Hmm.
started working for a guy doing that. A lot of my trade skills and stuff like that actually worked really well with that field. I did that for a number of years. Actually, I saw there was an opening with the Department of Natural Resources, with the Wildlife Division. I'm not like a game warden or anything. I do like habitat work, maintenance, that type of thing. And no, because people always get nervous at the gas station every
I was
winter.
about to say, man, it's like people are always, oh man.
Yeah, no, I'll go in there like, yeah, I'll stop at the gas station on my way to work for a coffee, and everyone gets all tight, and I'm just like, all right, calm down. I'm like, I can't do anything. But I end up applying, and for the position I'm in, it's not like I'm not like a biologist or a person making landscape level decisions. I'm the guy running equipment, things like that. So ended up being a real great fit for it, and I absolutely love my job. So I'll probably work
Yeah.
here till they either fire me or I die or whatever, one or the other.
I love
So
it, man. No, that's good. Good for you. Congrats on that. But it's
thank you.
something to resonate with what you're talking about here with
Hmm.
all the hunting. So, but let's talk about that. So were you always in Michigan or no?
Yeah, born and raised West Michigan.
Okay,
Yep, Grand
cool.
Rapids area. Now I'm a little south of there.
Okay, I used to have property. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was I don't know, maybe 45 minutes north of Grand Rapids. It's called White Cloud,
Yep.
right by Manistee over there. Yeah, not a bad area to hunt, that's for sure. But
No,
just a lot of
not at
hunters,
all.
as you know, with Michigan.
Yeah, I mean that my buddy just bought a cabin up that way. I cut my teeth hunting originally. We would drive up to Lake County every weekend before we really knew about all the state land down here. And
Yeah.
dude, you go out there on opening day. Like I went out there this year. I think I'm gonna get an orange plate carrier for next opening day because that was, dude,
Okay.
like you couldn't pull into a parking spot and then not be like seven
Man,
pickup trucks.
I don't.
So
I don't.
it's tradition.
Do you ever talk to people and they just can't connect with how much people hunt here, or like how populated it is with that?
It's certainly it's very off-putting if you go to out-of-state places and you talk to people and they're like, man, this place is just a zoo, and you're looking around, like two or three trucks in the whole game area. And I'm like, well, I don't know if this is a zoo. Like, I don't think people quite understand how many. I mean, we have almost 500,000 hunters.
Yeah.
We have more hunters than many places had deer by like a large margin. So you can look at places like Maryland. I could be wrong on these numbers, but I recall they had something like 250,000 deer to like 100,000 hunters. And I don't think an environment like that can really comprehend having a 500,000 hunters, And we
Yeah.
have quite a few deer, but like it is, I mean, if you think about how many deer we have and how many of them are bucks and how many of them are mature bucks, like we have to be outnumbering them by a significant amount, you know.
Totally.
So.
Yeah. I used to live in that area, and I could tell you, I used to live in kind of that DC area. People hunted, but it was nothing like here. I mean, whether it was public, I used to hunt on a like military base, and then actually, I think part of the benefit there was they had urban hunting seasons, and you could hunt. I think our urban seasons would start from like July, and they wouldn't end till like end of January, and you could like bow hunt in your backyard or anybody's backyard if they gave you permission. It was kind of wild, just based on like how many deer they had in a density of the urban areas. But I never felt pressure like here. I mean, I even speaking to private hunting, not even public, but you just get enamored. I mean, every feels like every 10 acres there's two guys in a tree.
Yeah.
So it gets very competitive.
Well, and back east here too, people don't own big parcels. I've been out in like Wyoming, and you're looking at Onyx, and you'll drive for a half hour, and it's the same name on the land
Yeah,
you're bordering. But here it's like you drive 500 meters, you pass 3 or 4 landowners, and you're like, oh, okay.
totally.
So
Totally. Well, cool, man. So are you always hunting different places? Like I just noticed you're across state lines, as kind of mentioned. Like you've hunted Michigan obviously a lot. This year I saw you hunting in Ohio a lot, from what it seemed like. I know you were mentioning you just got back right before we started the episode, but then I saw you hunted I think you hunted in Maine for
Yep.
moose, right?
Yep.
And then I've seen you go out west a few times. So what's the thrill that kind of drew that? Like, because you mentioned even your first full year, you started going out to Colorado or whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, really, like I kind of said how I got started on this too. I was watching that watching that on Netflix. Prior to me becoming a hunter, I did do a lot of road tripping. I would hop in my car and I would go places. I'd go just camping or even go to different cities and visit. But really, you come into a thing of I personally can't go somewhere and not have a task, right? It's people like, I'm going to go on vacation to Florida. I can't sit here and watch
Mm-hmm.
the waves, right? So I felt like with hunting, I feel like out of state hunting or just hunting in general is really one of the last true like routes you can take for an authentic, uncontrolled adventure. Especially in a developed Western country like we are. You go out there to Colorado in the mountains, like that's the closest thing you're going to get to like really living an adventure. I mean maybe Alaska actually is a step up, but beyond that, it's
Yeah.
everything's so curated, and even in Michigan, I love hunting and I love exploring a different part. Like I'll go to the northwest corner of the state to hunt the dunes. I'll go to the southeast corner and go to like the Alpena areas, all sorts of different environments. And maybe the hunting's not as good there, but there's an adventure to be found. There's something to do. There's a thrill to it. I think going out of state just steps that thrill up. I feel like this is such a weird reference, but if you've ever played like Zelda on the N64 back in the '90s, you
My
know,
God, yeah.
you know what I'm saying? You have to get the different medallions from the different dungeons. I feel like I feel like when I go mule deer hunting, I'm getting like the water temple. All right, and then I'm getting the
Oh
other
my God,
temple.
that's so funny. Dude, had you not said that game, I'd have never even remembered it, but I definitely recall playing that. It was like that. God, what else did we play? Mario Party or something,
Yeah,
and GoldenEye was a thing back
yeah,
then, and that is hilarious. But I totally get the reference because it does make sense.
yeah.
So would you say you like more so enjoy the adventure of it than just like I'm gonna go kill an animal kind of a deal?
Oh, by an extremely large margin. Like if you look at some of the places I've hunted in state and out of state, people think it's like a completely ridiculous decision. Like example, I went to Vermont last year.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at ratings for best whitetail states from one to number one being the best, I think Vermont's 49. You know, is one of the absolute worst. I even was on some of the pages and people were like they're trying to save me. They're like, save your money, just stop in Pennsylvania, stop in Ohio on the way, But the thing is I had driven near the Green Mountains before. And I remember years earlier, I was like, I'm gonna come back here and do something one day. Then I got into hunting. I was like, I should go try to kill a buck out in those mountains. Didn't happen. They were right. It's extremely difficult. I get why it's number 49, but it's. I mean, think about it. Some of these places you can go for adventure. If you can really get around the idea of it has to have a ton of good quality big bucks that are easy to kill, if you can get around that, all right, you can get these out of state tags for pennies on the dollar compared to other states. In some
Yeah.
of these states that are less popular, like Maine or Vermont, I mean, look up how much public land they have. They have more public land than some states have in land mass in totality. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely about the adventure. Of course, now and again, I like to get something, and I do. I get some success. I started getting more success the past couple years. So,
Yeah, yeah.
no.
No, I definitely saw that. Congrats to you. You shot a buck in Ohio, it looked like.
Yep, just 2 days ago, finally wrapped that up.
Nice, man. Well, I have in my brain here to talk Ohio a little bit, but you piqued my interest here. So you go to Vermont. Was that last year or a couple years ago?
That was last year, and I made that decision to go there 48 hours before I left to go.
Okay. That's awesome, man. Okay, so you go out there. I've never hunted Vermont. I know the East Coast certainly has its own deal, and you got mountain bucks that it's a whole nother ballgame. What were some what was some like key takeaways there in the experience that you maybe didn't even think about, or you experienced and came back and said like, oh yeah, that was a good learned lesson.
Well, one thing is like when you're hunting low density areas, for deer like that, and to be honest, in my opinion, also relatively low pressure. Deer really do live in pockets, and I know that sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but when you're somewhere like Michigan, where we have ag everywhere,
Hmm.
swamp cover everywhere, like you actually could find a deer anywhere, really, like if, with enough time. But going someplace like that, you really have to learn like what the specific area offers for deer and you have to target in on it. So out there, you have no ag. They have
Mhm.
hardly any acorns, So you end up looking at these old maps and finding some abandoned orchard like in the mountains, and maybe some of those apple trees still produce, right? And you'll try to target it on something like that. So
Mm.
it made it so whenever I go somewhere where there's just less deer, I think you're better off having 2 or 3 days of scouting and 1 day of hunting than 4 days of hunting because you
Yep.
can spend a lot of time looking at nothing if you're just kind of hoping to catch them on a route. Like, oh, here's a saddle, deer should come over a saddle. Like those deer might not come over any of the saddles for miles until you find the one area deer are going to be at.
Yeah. I'd highly agree with what you just said, though. I think the scouting aspect is not not something that a lot of people do, but really knowing the area, at least kind of getting intel, makes it so much better as far as success rate goes versus you only can hunt for 5 days and then you're
Hmm.
figuring it out and then the pressure's on, right? So now you're like, oh man, I gotta move, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, and it gives you some anxiety.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
So did you see deer at all when you were over there?
I actually missed a doe at like 30 yards off the ground on my second day. Honestly, I miss a lot. You may follow me. You'll see, I miss a lot of deer, dude. I kill a lot of deer, but I miss a lot of deer. And my thing is I'm supposed to be the boogeyman, right? But these deer they sneak up on me at the least. I'm not expecting them, and by the time I even notice them, it's like you have 5 seconds to shoot this deer, or they're gonna
Totally.
run away. So I
Yep.
missed that doe. The rest of the time, I mean, I couldn't get on deer. I've found sign of deer. I think near the end there, I found a couple areas. If I would have had another like 3 or 4 days, I probably could have gotten something. But
Hmm.
man, like, it's a tough place to hunt. I'll be honest. If you're in that New England area and you're not in like the developed cities and the suburbs, if you're in the mountains, that's a rifle hunt. That's a rifle
Yeah.
country for sure. Doing it with a bow is a very tall order, I suspect. Yeah.
Well, two things there. You miss all the opportunities you don't take, right? So
Yep.
if you only got that one opportunity, you better freaking take it. So it sounds like
Yep.
you did. But yeah, I was talking to somebody else kind of offline, but they were saying the same thing. They went and they were scouting in the Adirondacks, and they spent like 3 days doing it. And they were like, dude, like it's a lot harder than I thought it was. And I'm like, yeah, because you really got to pinpoint where those deer are. Otherwise, you're spending a lot of time looking, and
Hmm.
especially if you're bouncing around through the mountains, like you don't even know what you're spooking because they're gonna hear you, if you're just
Hmm.
constantly walking around too. So so that's cool. All right, so that's one experience. So you've hunted Vermont. How long ago did you go out to Colorado?
Oh, it's been about 2 years since so 3 seasons back, I guess. Colorado. I've done Colorado twice now. Like I said, the first time I went out there, I still hadn't even killed a whitetail buck when I went elk hunting.
Huh?
The second time I went archery elk hunting, and both of those events were a complete mess. But I
Okay.
learned I learned a billion lessons. It's like hunting elk out west. I think now if I go out there, I could probably pull something together. But going out there with like no guidance and extremely minimum experience, like it was baptism by fire, and I was
Oh.
burnt to a crisp by the end of it for sure.
Attention hunters. Are you sick and tired of the complicated draw systems and tag applications that take place out west? Or maybe you want to plan a western hunt or maybe one of your dream hunts and you don't really even know where to start. Well, that's where East to West Hunts comes in. We take care of everything for you. We'll do the tag applications. We just need to put a strategy in play for you of what you're trying to do and when you're trying to go. Whether it's short term, mid-term, or long term, we want to have that play and that strategy together. And when you do draw a tag, we can look at do-it-yourself options such as hunt plans that detail out exactly how to hunt those areas, or we can get you booked with a guide and outfitter in that specific unit or area. So don't leave that hunt to chance. Give us a call, set up a time on the website, contact us on social media, whatever it is, and let's get planning towards that dream hunt of yours. And let's make it a reality. Check us out on www.east2westhunts.com. Again, that is www.east2westhunts.com. Also check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and podcast. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Dude, like, yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, but
Hey,
I love Colorado. I plan on going back there. I've got a bit of a points I'm building up out there, and I'm gonna start hitting it again probably in the next year or two.
Okay. Yeah. So did you go over the counter elk hunting then on both of them?
So this is prior to, they have all these different websites now and things and resources like you to help people kind of plan where they're going to go. But originally, I was going to go out west. It's impossible to get a group of people together to stick to a plan early in the year. So
Mm-hmm.
everybody bails. It's midsummer, and Colorado has a super late draw, for
Yep.
some reason. Like I think it's absurdly late, even
Yep.
even the first draw. So now I'm past the first draw. I'm looking at available elk tags on a printout off the CPW website, trying to find leftover elk tags, comparing it to success ratios on another sheet of paper, comparing it to draw ratios, right? And I end up getting a leftover cow tag for a unit that is like 30% public land. So it's like
Yeah.
I'm just stacking the odds against me, you know what I mean? But I told myself, you know what? Like I'm going elk hunting. It's gonna happen no matter what. And this is back
Yep.
when elk tags were like $500.
Okay.
The good old days. The days I will
Yes.
never. The days that.
Now they're 800 for a contact.
Yeah, yeah. It's the same price as the bull tag. So it's like,
I
why would you
know.
even get the cow tag?
Crazy.
But no, I went out there doing that. And my brother ended up coming with me last minute. And to be fair, I mean, we had no idea what we were doing, and we hiked our butts off. And like I said, we were way too low originally. Like we're spooking a mule deer, and I'm looking for rattlesnakes. And by the end of it, we're higher up, and we ended up getting an opportunity at there was like a herd of cows, probably 10 cows, and this huge herd bull. And I was just inexperienced, man. I came right over the horizon, right over the hill.
Yeah.
Like did everything wrong, sun to my back. And I come up and I just hear this elk bugling. I'm like, huh, what's that sound? I look over, he's just staring at me. And they all just sprint down into private land. And I was like, oh no.
Man.
But for someone who's never been out there and really didn't know anything about elk behavior, the fact we were able to eventually kind of figure out where to look, by the end of it, I
Yep.
mean, no, that was a win in my book. So
That is a
yeah.
win, man. There's so many people that go out that don't even ever see an elk. So the fact
Mhm.
you kind of put that together, that's a win in itself. I would agree with that. That's pretty awesome. All right, so you go for a cow tag, then you end up. Are you bull elk hunting the next time you go?
Yep. So I ended up going out there with a buddy who was actually a customer of mine at my old jobs when I sold building material. But we ended up driving out there. I spend the whole summer scouting these units. We're kind of thinking like the flat tops, that northwest corner. I have all these points. Oh, let's go here, 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 here. And this dude convinces me on the way out there. He's like, no, 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 no. I know the area, right? So we end up in a completely different unit. I did little to no scouting.
Okay.
I'll tell you, man, that was probably the toughest hunt, one of the toughest Western hunts I've ever gone on. The only elk I ever saw was from the truck.
Okay.
I saw everything but an elk. I ran to mule deer. We had a mountain lion encounter. We had a black bear encounter. Any huntable game, antelope, grouse, anything you could possibly find out there, I ran into, but except for an elk. But it was, and we ended up in this unit with so much beetle kill you couldn't physically walk off the trail. But there was
Okay.
like rubs everywhere. There was elk poop. So I was like, oh, this is the spot. But now in hindsight with experience, it's like even if we found an elk, we were never going to be able to get an arrow in an elk in a place like that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
definitely
Was it really physical too?
extremely physical. At that time, I was less fat for sure. I had been training all year, and I mean, I remember one day I think we clocked like 12 miles or something
Okay.
ridiculous like that. Just hiking everywhere, trying to figure things out. And I really do think some of the areas we got into, we could have had success. We wanted to hunt the very opener in September, but we ended up delaying it like a week. We had some stuff pop up, and I just kept finding like cow carcasses when people broke down their kill.
Mm,
So I'm thinking people got in there real early, probably locals who knew what to look for, came in there real early and just maybe pushed those elk out of some of these areas that we were originally going to try. And then
yeah.
after that, like, we probably just didn't have the experience to know where to really go from there.
Yeah.
And then even the places I originally scouted we were going to go to, and this is a big thing you have to learn when you're planning hunts is just because it shows a road on Onyx doesn't mean your truck's going to get down. And we got out there and it was very much not nearly as accessible as we thought. And so that forced us to basically go to a completely different part of the state halfway through the hunt because we couldn't even
Mm.
go to our backup plan.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you're saying it for sure. Like e-scouting is definitely important, but you're spot on. We went on our elk hunt this year, and a few of the guys, they had never been out west, so their big takeaway was like how long it takes to get places. you know, because you might see there's a road, and yes, you might be able to get on it, but it's still like, you're slow rolling. You got rocks all over the place. You obviously don't want to get a flat. You're off-roading, and it might take you 45 minutes to an hour to get a few miles, five,
Mm-hmm.
6, 7 miles, whatever it is. So that that time aspect is a big one too, or it's inaccessible, right? You go 4 miles in and you're like, oh my God, I can't get further. Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to park here? Am I going to hike?
Mm-hmm.
Am I turning around? What's the plan? You easily could lose time doing that. So that's
No.
cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially when you're on limited time, I think that's something people don't realize in out of state hunts. It's really easy to be like, all right, let's check this ridge here, let's glass here, and let's glass here. But the reality is going from this parking area to this ridge with your hike, then your hike back to the truck, you burned up 60% of the day, maybe possibly doing that. And if you only have 5 days, I mean, you can only do that 5 times, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if you don't get it right at least the first 2 or 3 times, that means every single hit after that is basically like there needs to be something here the first time we go to the spot, you know.
Yep. Yeah, dude, 100%. I've seen that time and time again. So
Hmm.
that's so true. All right, so you hunted out west. Did you hunt anywhere else out west now, or did you
Yeah,
kind of
yep.
convert more east? Okay,
So I killed my first mule deer in Nebraska last year, and that was my first
okay.
successful Western hunt. And that one was different because by the time I got to Nebraska, all the lessons of the moose hunt, of the elk hunts, of just hunting whitetails here, finally killing some good Michigan bucks, I went
Mm-hmm.
back out there and I was way more dialed in. You know, understanding thermals, understanding how to read like topographic maps, and just I kind of knew right away we have to go here, we have to go here, we have to go here. And in
Yep.
the end, it ended up, and all that experience ended up coming together. I got myself a nice 4x4. That was an interesting hunt because it wasn't supposed to happen. I actually, to draw that unit, they made it a draw unit for mule deer. The only reason I got that tag is because I was randomly selected after a return.
Okay.
So I didn't even have enough points technically to get the tag usually. Yeah, I just got that mule deer tag and it all worked out. If I didn't have the ability to shoot muleys, only whitetails, I didn't run into a single shooter whitetail that entire week.
Hmm.
So,
So did you get a phone call or like an email saying that you got the tag, or what ended
yep.
up happening there?
I was out
Okay.
in the field. I was doing habitat work at my previous job. I was out in the field and I just got this call from Nebraska. I picked it up and the guy's like, "Hey, I was wondering if you would want this mule deer tag or not." And I'm like, "Obviously, yeah, I'm gonna take that right now." And they actually let you return your whitetail tag if you do that, so you don't have to pay for both. Because you could technically
Sweet.
have two buck tags in Nebraska as a non-resident.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
Okay.
I got that. But that was probably my favorite Western hunt. Like that one was not just having the experience, but I went out there with my brother and we did the whole thing. We rented a cabin, so it was way more comfortable. But I think Western Nebraska is definitely a gem. Like, it's someplace I'm going to visit again in the future. That's definitely my favorite.
Yeah. What was your terrain like there?
It's kind of like Badlands, if you can imagine, all coniferous with a mix of prairies, and then
Mm-hmm.
you have essentially like rock formations and hills, but they weren't mountains per se. But if you're from the flat Midwest, they might as well be mountains.
Yep.
But definitely a cool environment. Like there's some areas there I hunted where if you would have knocked me out, teleported me to this spot, and I woke up, and you convinced me I was somewhere in Colorado without the mountains on the horizon line, like I wouldn't be able to tell the difference in
Mm-hmm.
some of these areas. So it's definitely a different vibe though, because you can go to one unit in Nebraska and you might as well be in Iowa. And then you go to a different unit and it's a completely different style Western spot and stalk hunting.
Yep.
And no matter what anybody says on the pages or anything, Nebraska is I think Nebraska is a very good hunting state, and I think it's very much worth visiting.
Yeah. I have this inkling that we're going to see more and more folks hunting Nebraska and South Dakota in the next 5 years or so,
Hmm.
because I think they are, well, for viewers and listeners, obviously a secret to it, right? But I think there is a lot to be said positive for probably both of those states, and I love that's probably my favorite topography to hunt is those rolling hills. It's like Christmas every time you get to another hill and you
Yeah,
look over, 'cause you're like, oh man, like what's over here? And sometimes you get over and there's animals in them, and you can sit there in glass, and it's just fun.
yeah, no,
So
definitely. I think too is it's like when you're Western hunting in other mountainous states, it's really hard to be like, let's check the next valley over because that's a whole task. As to out there, you can kind of feel like you're doing that, but really you're only covering like 700 yards and you're in a whole different area basically.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So definitely,
It's a mini
that might be
version.
better. Yep, miniature out west. And the thing is, if you go out to some of these places like Nebraska, I don't know about South Dakota, but like you'll see elk, you'll see everything you'll see out west, just out there in the open. Oh no, definitely.
That part's just weird, right? Because like I think to the imagination, if somebody hasn't been out west, to the imagination, they're thinking elk, always in mountainous terrain,
Hmm.
and you get them in ag fields, you get them in rolling hills, you get them in sagebrush. It's just it kind of like really opens your eyes to like, oh man, these animals, they can survive in other places.
Hmm.
and and they certainly do. I mean, even this year for us in Colorado, I mean, we had like 400 head of elk 2 days in a row, and they were in flat area right by the
Hmm.
mountains, and there were elk still high up in the mountains. So it was kind of like clearly those animals were picking their poison based on what the pressure was like.
Yeah, and there's a difference too between like migrating animals and resident animals. I think a lot of people go out west, and especially early mule deer archery guys, like they're getting real high up into the alpine with their bows. But you can walk around September like first and push some big velvet muleys out like down in the bottom of these mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Animals are just gonna be where they're gonna be. And the truth is, if you look at historical ranges of elk, like there was elk here in Michigan all over the place at one point, so they can live
Yep.
anywhere. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I think that there's in the mountains because they know it's hard for us to get up there. I
Yep.
suspect.
Well, listen, I apply every year for Michigan. We'll see if I ever draw.
Yeah, yeah, you and me both. I'll get to wait. Maybe 90-year-old Gideon will be out there finally plugging one. So we'll see.
It's probably our best odds of a 400-inch elk.
Yeah. Well, I put in for a couple of these eastern states, like Kentucky, non-residents get put in for. I was putting in for PA, but that's basically pointless. But, you never know if you draw it. I mean, somebody has
Yep.
to draw it. Somebody has to. Might as well
Totally.
be me.
Yeah. Listen, I hear it every year. I've had clients every year. Somebody draws a miracle tag, and you're like, dude, you had no business. There were two tags and you got one, and it's just like
Yep.
it happens. That's why you put in for them. So all right. So you've had okay. So to tally here, we have Vermont, Maine, Michigan, Ohio, Nebraska, Colorado. Any other states we're missing?
Nope, that's all there is for like big game hunting. I've like dabbled like, hunting grouse and stuff in some other like New England states, but that's not really the same thing. So
Yeah.
I've fished all over the place, but again, not the same thing.
Yep. Still, the adventure though,
Yep.
definitely some aspects to it.
Well, what am I supposed to do all summer? I mean, I can't, if I can't go hunting, I gotta go do something.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's a perk here. We got all the lakes and stuff, so it's very nice to be able to do that.
yeah. Yeah, Michigan is, for all the lack of big bucks and people complain about, like, I still think we're one of the best states to be an outdoorsman in by an extremely large margin. Like, I don't think it's
Yep.
close.
No, 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 no. It's beautiful. I mean, I've kind of lived all over the place, and coming back, you really appreciate it. Sometimes I wonder, I'm like, man, why didn't I explore the state more?
Hmm.
But I didn't appreciate it as much until I lived elsewhere, and I said, wow, there's a lot of cool stuff back in Michigan. It's like got to take advantage of that stuff, and we certainly
Hmm.
do. We did this last summer. My neighbor and I we did 100 miles of hiking, and we had to do it in like overnight stints. Had a max of 3 weekends, so we were plugging like 35, 40 miles a weekend, kind of a deal. But we were kind of all over the state doing it, and it was such a cool experience because we were going to places and we were running into people that were from out of state all over the place,
Hmm.
and it was wild. And I talked to them, and I'm like, so why don't you do this, wherever you're from? And they're like, we don't have this where we live, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool. Like, you got a little bit of pride to it, going like, we do have a lot of natural resource here. You got to take advantage of it.
Just having a lot of public land. Like, if you even look at, I just got back from Ohio. The
Hmm.
deer hunting is great, but if you were a hiker, like you're basically just hiking around WMAs in a circle. You know what I mean? There's not like a big national forest. I mean, there is, but nothing like what we have, where
Yeah.
you could theoretically walk from one end of the state. What was it called, the North County Trail or whatever, North
Yep.
Country
Yeah. Yeah.
Trail? You could
Yep.
walk
North Country Trail.
the whole state pretty much. Yeah.
Well, that's the
So,
longest continuous trail in the country.
hmm.
So it's wild. We actually did 2 weekends on the North Country Trail. It's
Okay.
beautiful, and completely different topography in a couple different areas too. So you really got to experience different things. One thing that was interesting though is like, for the folks that kind of hike like the Appalachian Trail and all that kind of stuff, there's a bunch of stuff where you end up like the trail is actually alongside the road. So you end up like hiking the road,
Yeah,
or, you're hiking against private property that's like a just literally a trail on the edge of it, and you're going along some people's backyards for miles,
yeah,
which I didn't expect, but kind of a cool aspect to it. You get a little bit
yeah.
of that
A little
urban stuff.
awkward too,
So
maybe.
yeah,
Walking
it's
people's
I mean, you're
backyard.
like for 10 hours you're hiking through like forests, and then all of a sudden you get to like, your last 5 miles of the day to get to the nearest wherever you were going to stay was, 4 miles of roads, and then you ended up at a campground or something. So it was interesting, but cool experience.
No, definitely.
So let's talk Ohio. You obviously were there. I guess talk me through what made you land on Ohio, and kind of your season there, because I feel like every weekend I saw you down there for what it looked like.
So Ohio was a perfect storm for me. So I started my
Okay.
new job with the state, and one thing is I was able to kind of work my schedule where I work 4 10s, so I just don't work Fridays. You know what I mean? That's a massive advantage. You want out of state hunt within one state. The
Yeah.
thing is originally I was going to go to Indiana. Well, as you know, Michigan, we got the EHD outbreak this year, which was pretty bad. But North Indiana got hammered really bad to the point where, don't quote me on this. I believe I read this online that they won't even allow doe harvest with firearms on public land in parts of the state. That's how
Okay.
bad it got. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm on the west side of the state, I'm going to scoot down to Indiana on the weekends and then pop back up. But once I heard that, I'm kind of like, well, I don't know if that's where I'm going to really spend all my money and my time where all the deer are dead.
Yeah.
Or even if they're not all dead, like my chances are lower.
Sure.
So Ohio, right? Land of the Giants. Everybody seems to go there. So I'm like, might as well be me too. So
Mm-hmm.
I ended up making my way over there. A couple of the big things about Ohio too, also is their season dates. Like you can start bow hunting some areas in September, but then their muzzleloader doesn't even start till after the New Year's, and you can bow hunt into February. So you basically get like almost 5 months of
Mm-hmm.
opportunity on one tag. So that all went together, and the tag is under $300. I mean, it was just a perfect combination of events that were like, all right, we're going to Ohio. The thing is, going to Ohio, selecting an area of the state, not going to say names of places, but people tend to go to the southeast. There's a lot of public land. There's a lot of big areas that are kind of known and famous. The thing is because my plan was Indiana, I have these 3 day weekends. If you're not committing an entire week to a place, I need to have it within our drive time that makes sense. Because if I'm going to be driving 7 hours, it's like it doesn't make sense just to do it on 3 day stints. You need to do it in a longer stint, especially
Mm-hmm.
putting gas in a 3/4 ton truck and driving down there every time. So I selected an area, kind of central Ohio. It's about 4 hours from where I live here, which is just on the area of like that's basically going to the UP. It's not that
Yep.
bad.
Yep.
So I drive out here, and I do believe I found an overlooked area. But I don't want to bust out where it is, but
Yeah.
it's an area that just simply I get why hunters wouldn't go there because at face value it doesn't really make sense. But I have never seen so many shooter bucks in my entire life, almost every single sit.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down there all by myself. No idea what I'm doing. I'm just driving around in my truck. I end up picking an area that on the map, I'm like, well, this is hill country. I know people talk about benches. I know out west you'd hunt saddles and all these other things, but I don't know if this is exactly what it's like here. I'm not necessarily in the Appalachian foothills yet either, so it's like I'm in like a patch of foothills separate from the Appalachians,
Okay.
or hill country separate from the Appalachians. I get in here and I walk 10 yards from the truck and I look over, there's a huge rub on this tree. And so I just start following this rub line up to speed the story up. I basically find an incredible amount of sign all over this first piece, and I set up for my first hunt. Within 30 minutes of my first sit, man, I have a shooter buck come in to 20 yards, and like I said earlier, I miss a lot. Right? I think all I do is it's like, come on. I practice a lot. I shoot 3D. I do all this stuff, and I still just it has to be target panic in combination with I need to get off my phone. So I'm sitting in, because half the time I'm just like, I have a theory, right? Deer know when you're looking for them, and so if you play on your phone, it actually deletes their ability to detect you paying attention. I know it's not true, but it seems to be the case. Because if I play on my phone, I look up, there's a deer. Like 90% of the time, it works out like that. I look up and like I'm like, all right, I'm gonna shoot this buck. I draw back, and I only have again. I haven't kind of rushed it. He comes in, merp, merp, and he was at really in hindsight, he was like 18 yards. You know how you would use your rangefinder and you would, all right, that tree's 30, that tree's 40. When all the trees look the same, it's actually a really stupid idea because I was in a pine forest. So I'm like, oh, that's
Okay.
that's the 30-yard tree. Really wasn't. Wrong pin, right over his back. I didn't wound him, right? I found the arrow and it opened and there was hair in one of the blades of the mechanical, but zero blood. And the deer ran off like he didn't even sprint off. He just like walked off like I was
Okay.
stupid. That's my
Yeah.
first hunt, man. Just got my butt handed to me. I went back down there a second time with a buddy. We committed 5 days to it. That was the most ridiculous week of my life. Every single set. No, because
Dude, you crack me up, man.
no, because it's just like in Michigan, right? If I see like 1 2.5 year old every once in a while on public land, I'm like, oh, it's like game time. I mean,
Totally.
I'm
It's
like a
on.
predator. With the visibility cloak. He's like, like I'm ready. But like out here, I mean, I had one morning where I sat in a tree and I proceeded to watch a bachelor group of bucks come by, 10 of them together, right? The biggest one of them, 130, 140, and then a couple like 120s, and then everything else was smaller, but still bigger than anything I shot in Michigan, right?
Yep.
And it's like November, like 20th, and I'm like, why are these bucks already hanging out together, and what's going on? And and then every single sit after that, maybe it wasn't big of a group. I have a single sit where I have a shooter, like visible. On that same week, I had another shooter came in on a bench. He's probably like I can't at 115, 120 class buck. For me, I'll shoot that all day. He comes in, same thing, dude. I wasn't on my phone this time either. He comes in, I draw back, and I'm like, all right. I range these trees. These trees are way more identifiable. I'm like, he's gonna come in right there. It's gonna be 30 yards. It goes right under him. Right. He ends up being like
Man.
38 yards or something. I don't know. But and he doesn't blow and run out. He just walks away like I'm done. And I'm like, "Oh," at this point, right? And the thing is, some people you could walk away, right? You're like, oh, it's not going to work out this year. But I couldn't because every sit, I just have multiple good deer coming within sight. And I'm like, all right, that doesn't work out. That same hunt, I dropped the ball. This is me for real dropping the ball. That bachelor group that came by the previous morning, I set up where they're going to come through this time. I'm up on this hill. And it's like right before Thanksgiving, my grandma and my aunt are texting me like, "What are you bringing to the dinner?" Right? So I'm watching this video about how to make this mac and cheese right on TikTok, and I'm like, "Oh, it's pretty," And I
Oh my
look
god.
up, and that 130, 140 buck, whatever, was like 5 yards to my left, and he's just under me, is catching my wind. And by the time I didn't even get excited. You know how your heart rate will jump up? I
Totally.
didn't even. I was just like, "Oh, I'm cooked." Like I didn't even. I was like, this isn't gonna happen." And he immediately ran off, and that was like, ugh. Like at that point, I couldn't be mad at anybody but myself.
Did you hear him come in at all?
I had about 10 yards. Yeah. I mean, it was
Yeah, okay.
windy, real windy on top of this hill. And the thing is, I should have, because it was really crunchy and dry, but it was that. And also, like, I was a little irritated with my aunt at the time because it was like, I thought I didn't have to bring anything. And now I have
Yeah.
to bring mac and cheese
You're
apparently.
ruining my vibe.
No, oh no, not even that. Because, like, then my cousin texted me, like, I'm actually bringing mac and cheese. So it's a complete waste. So I didn't even, that wasn't even the recipe I made. Anyway, moving on from
Hilarious.
that. I'm like,
Hilarious.
whatever. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna come back in 2 weeks at the end of their rifle season. I mean, this should be cake. I should wrap this up. You know, I set up on that same hill where saw that big buck. I ended up having two bucks come in real early. I don't even know the score on them. They're probably 2.5 year old bucks. I proceeded to watch them fight for like 20 minutes over a doe. Like never seen that in Michigan. Just in the open, like fighting to the death. And I have my sights on them for like a good while. The truth is one of them probably was a shooter, but I just could not figure out which buck was which because they were kind of in some brush. I end up deciding not to shoot. And I'm like, I'll be rewarded if I'm patient. Those big ones will come back through. Sure
Hmm.
enough, they do. Two big ones come through, but the only thing is I can only see their heads and their neck over the horizon of this hill, dude. And I
Got it.
have to sit there and watch them for like 20 minutes. I can't. I'm not gonna take a neck shot. You already heard. I'm a horrible marksman. So I'm like, I'm not
Pain
even,
and
not even,
agony.
gonna, not even gonna bother, dude. So they walk away, and then I proceed to blow out another area. I had originally missed that first buck the first time I went down there. I'm not gonna explain the whole story of that, but there's a valley that I had hunted every trip down there at least one time. I learned the patterns of the deer. I learned the bedding areas. I learned everything about it, but I could not find a way to hunt it without completely just blowing it out in my scent.
Okay.
So now here we are. I'm like defeated, but I'm like, I got one more in me. I'm gonna head back down here again. They have a bonus rifle season. It's 2 days long. It's a weekend, so the pressure's gonna be up. And I go to that first area I go to is the same area where I saw those bucks I didn't shoot last time.
Mm-hmm.
20 degrees, dude. 17. I don't know how fast the wind was. Just direct non-stop wind in my face all morning for 5 hours. Didn't
Mm.
see a single deer. Right,
Oh man.
just hurting, feeling discouraged. But I'm like, you know what? I end up deciding I'm gonna go back to that valley. I have a slight northwest on this morning. And if that northwest is true, even remotely true, and if the thermals, are on because there's some sun out, I should be able to barely scoot my wind up the side of this hill.
Okay.
I'd make my entry in excruciatingly slow. I mean, I left the truck at 1. I was in the tree at 3:20, and this was less than a mile hike in. So this is like not an intensely. It's far for whitetail hunting maybe, but not far in general.
Yeah.
It's a dead silent forest. I can only really step during gust of wind. I get up in here, I throw my layers on real quiet, I climb up this tree, and when you're saddle hunting with a rifle, you have to have a strap on rifle rest under the tree. I think a lot of people don't like to rifle hunt from a saddle. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the most key components to doing that. And I sit there and I'm like, theoretically, that buck, or there's 2 bucks in this valley. The one I missed and another one I've been seeing, I've had a couple of encounters with. He should move from that bedding right into this valley, right up that hill. I sit there for 30 minutes, dude, and I hear a gunshot on the private land, like right where I thought they were gonna come from, and I'm like, "Dang, I'm a loser. This ain't happening." I'm sick of being out here, kind of. But I'm just like, nope, we're gonna stick it out. This is where we're at. And sure enough, that same buck I had missed on my very first hunt out there, all the way back on November 8th, came cruising right down the hill, right into that valley, right where I thought he was. I had all the time in the world, and I put it right through his shoulder, through both of his lungs. And I finally wrapped that story up. six
Dude,
weeks of
nice.
going to Ohio. Yeah, dude.
Nice. How
No, he
far was your shot?
80 yards maybe.
That's great.
Not
Okay.
bad at all. You have to use straight wall cartridges. So like I couldn't, I don't, like I've said, I miss a lot. So I'm not shooting them at 150, 200 yards with that gun. Like it's just not going to happen. And that's the thing too. I was like, I shouldn't have been because my rifle was sighted in. I had a good rest, but like, I was like, oh wow, you got them. Like good job, dude. Like, about
Dude,
time.
yeah.
It's
That's
about
awesome,
time.
man.
But
Well,
yeah, I went up to him and he's a good buck. I don't know what he scores, but I think he's like a good 2.5-year-old, but the best 2.5-year-old I ran into down there. So
oh,
I'm
that's
pretty
awesome.
happy with him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you should be. So,
yeah.
so I know you have some comical aspects to it with with your shooting, but I took away some good bits there. I mean, one, you went back and you really knew the area. I think that's huge. Two, you talked about wind, thermals, playing the terrain. You obviously knew where they were coming from and so on and so forth. So I think all those things obviously benefited you in the long run, and I'm gonna bet you're probably gonna be able to go back there, or you're gonna want to go back there because it sounds like it's a good spot.
hmm No,
So
I definitely think the thing is a lot of that I learned going out west. That was all stuff I took from there. Because here in Michigan, you can play the train, but we don't have, like hills you can hunt like that, and there's swirling wind and all these other factors. Like when you're playing thermals in Michigan, it's like maybe they're in a ditch, and you're like up in the
yeah,
tree.
yep,
So nope, definitely. I think I'll go back there and kill a deer. The problem is that, like I talked about before, it's not. I'm not really just looking for big deer. I'm looking for adventure, and
hmm
I do have a goal of hitting every single state at some point. So I might go to Ohio next year, but it might make more sense to go wrap up like Indiana or something else off the list.
that's kind of funny. I actually have that same exact goal. I would like to kill an animal, big game animal in every state. That would be like tip of the iceberg for me in my life.
Yeah.
So, but I would agree with you. I'm not. I don't know. I like the trophy quality and all that jazz. But I'm an adventure seeker myself, so I'll learn an area and then I'll go like I want to go try this new thing out that's going to be hard as hell, but I want to like conquer it. So I'm going to go
Yep.
pick some difficult thing. Like this year, I was actually thinking about maybe doing like a series of episodes or videos, but like literally throwing a dart on a map in a certain state and being like, all right, this is where I'm going. Like I got to go
Hmm.
tackle it and see how it is because why not, right? Like
Yeah, exactly.
so sounds fun. Well, congrats to you there. I saw your pic on Instagram, so I was like, oh man, this is gonna be great. Like we're gonna chat it up, and he just shot something, so this is awesome.
Yeah. No, awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So I noticed something else though. I thought it was pretty cool, but you put together some form of I think it's a pop up trailer. If
Yep.
I'm thinking correctly, was that something that you kind of like thought about because of how many times you've been out west, wanting a place to stay, or like where'd that kind of come from?
Man, because that was the biggest thing was I've slept in a tent plenty of times. I'll do some backcountry hunting again. I have no problem doing it, but it sucks. Like anybody who tells you any different, you could have the best sleeping bag in the world, the best pad in the world. Like I don't like waking up in a tube full of condensation. It was freezing. I don't like pooping having these dude wipes. It's just like I was having a bad time. And I'll do it. I'll do it. But I was like, you know what? When I went to Nebraska, we rented this cabin. It was $600 for the week, which is a steal, to be fair.
Yeah.
But we were well rested every morning. We were clean. We could shower. You could do whatever you wanted. And then obviously, I'm not gonna have all the same comforts as a cabin. But I'm like, I was stuck hunting within a 2-hour proximity of this cabin because of the convenience of camping here. But the reality is I should just invest in a camper because the amount of money I'm spending renting Airbnbs, renting little rental cabins, or even some cases I might even stay in a hotel if I'm not doing something backcountry. I just
Hmm.
need to have a camper. But the thing is with a pop up, a lot pop ups have kind of gone out of style, right? Pop ups are like kind of retro now. Like everybody
Yeah.
goes to rooftop campers or they have slide outs. But my thing is I like getting back into weird areas. Little national forest campgrounds, getting down two tracks, camping on WMAs that allow it. You also have to account for weight and gas mileage. Because look, I work in conservation. I'm not getting rich. I'm not gonna like that's just the truth. I'm not gonna. You're not gonna catch me in the 2025 Duramax with the fifth wheel. Like I ain't happening, dude. you know. So take into account like what is really cheap to haul. Like right now, I drive my 3/4 ton. I'm hoping to get my fiance like a crossover in the next year or two. And if I go hunting somewhere that doesn't require too much off-roading, like Ohio or something like that, I could even haul it with a crossover, right?
Hmm.
But having the low aerodynamics, you can throw kayaks on the roof if you're going hunting somewhere that needs water access, if you're going fishing somewhere. So there's a bunch of things that brought me to getting the pop-up. And now all the modifications I did is that a pop-up, actually not even just a pop-up. Here's the truth. All campers, except for like higher end ones like Airstreams or these Nebos look pretty good now. A lot of them are all made in the same factory in like Gary, Indiana, and they're horribly built. No offense to the people working in Gary. I mean, but, like, is this the truth? Is like if I've done some construction, and you take them apart, and it's like these aren't even exterior screws they're using or staples. They're using like non-weatherproofed OSB for the floor, and like everyone's like, why do I have rot? And I'm like, because it's meant to be inside of your house. It's not meant to be on a trailer. So I
Yep.
ended up buying a camper, and I got duped because I'm an idiot. And this lady, I don't think she was trying to dupe me, but she sold me this camper, and it seemed good to me, even though I suspected something was off. Ended up having a ton of water damage, right? I ended up spending the entire summer in 2024. I ripped the floor out. I ripped everything out except for the walls, the ceiling, the beds. They were all fine. I re-weather sealed them, and I proceeded to rebuild the whole thing with stainless steel fasteners, weatherproofed plywood. I moved all the plumbing internal so it was heated, so you could have a shower or you could use the sink or everything in the winter.
Mm.
I got these two old dogs. I love them. One of them's kind of the bane of my existence, but my girl loves them, so what am I gonna do? So I ended up making one of the areas that was formerly like a counter into like a steps for this dog. Ridiculous, but
Okay.
whatever. Oh, he's a dog. He can jump up on the bed, but whatever. Anyway, is I basically modified this whole thing into being a 4-season pop up camper. And I also, got better. what's it called? Higher load range tires are thicker. So when I go off road, they don't pop. All
Hmm.
sorts of minor things like that. It's not a full on off road camper. I would like to flip the axle, bring it up higher next year, things like that. But I basically had to build something that was the entire build from buying it to completing the build was under 4 grand.
It's not bad.
No, it weighs less than 1,800 pounds, so I can tow it anywhere. And then you could sleep 6 people in it if you had to. Of course, like you can't fit 6 people in the vehicle. That anyway, really.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're not gonna do that, but you could. It has all the creature comforts, and now whenever I want to go hunting somewhere, I'm not having to focus on where can I hunt within an area that I can camp. Like now, I can just look at areas like, does this area allow me to pull a camper to it? And it's
Hmm.
automatically open. Or if I go hunting somewhere, this area sucks because there's a ton of pressure. There's no deer. I can just pack up and move. I'm not stuck with an Airbnb anymore or something like that. You
Hmm.
know, so
Yeah.
that's why I ended up going that route.
Sounds like a lot of positives. I'm assuming it's been a huge benefit for you since having it.
Oh yeah, it's been huge, and not just for hunting. Like in the summer and stuff, it's nice. Just going camping, you know, it's all fun setting the tents up and stuff. But it's pretty cool just pulling up somewhere and I got a bed, I got power, I got heat. I'm chilling. The only thing I don't have is AC, but I guess you can't win all your battles, you know. So
Yeah, I would say the positive, I guess, on the hunting aspect is a lot of times you're hunting the fall and it's not that hot out.
yeah, yeah, it doesn't really matter for that exactly. No, it's been a big benefit for hunting. I've used it for. I even brought it to Ohio on one of my trips. So
That's cool,
definitely,
man.
yeah,
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, that's it's got to be pretty nice. I've never hunted out of a trailer or any kind of aspect like that. I've camped, staying on somebody's like property into them. I thought that was actually pretty sweet. But usually I'm rugging it out in
yep,
exactly what you're saying, right? The little tiny tent that weighs 2 pounds because I'm trying to save as much weight as
yep,
possible. And you definitely suffer a little bit, but you're like, I can get into some gnarly areas with it. So
yeah.
it's whatever kind of hunt you're trying to have too.
No, definitely. It's the adventure thing, you know. But sorry.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Well, you were talking about the Airbnb thing, but I've hunted Kansas quite a few times, and I've either had Airbnb or we hotel it, and then you end up driving to wherever. But you're usually hunting within 30, 45 minutes of there, so it's not bad, and it's really nice to have a really nice sleep. Like that's
Hmm.
that's that's huge. I think that goes. I think a lot of people either they don't want to make it sound that bad, or they maybe they want to sound more badass in some way. I don't know what it is, but like sleep is just something I have to have. I'm the guy in camp
Yeah.
that's always in bed first because I'm just like, all right, I'm going to bed because I need my 7 hours.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Like I like doing the hardcore thing. And I will do it plenty more times, but it's just some of these hunts I just realize you don't have to. Like if you're
Mm-hmm.
if you're hunting whitetails in Ohio, like you don't need to be miserable, you know. But for
Yep.
like elk hunting and stuff, there is a reality of like unless you're hunting within 3 miles of a trailhead, like you need to stay out there, or else you're just burning your whole trip hiking, and you're burning yourself out hiking. You know.
Yep. Well, that was Antonio from the last episode. He hunted Colorado, and he was talking about how like they hotel camped per se because they were a couple, they were like an hour and a half, whatever, but they were hiking into areas every day. But that was like their trade-off was like, well, we're gonna at least get some good sleep, but we're gonna have
Hmm.
to hike in, and they were still doing like a couple miles. That's pretty rugged because I know the unit really well, but to that same point, like if you can do it, especially nowadays, like in these later seasons, like it gets dark really early, so you could be back at a hotel with a decent amount of sleep, and you're not losing that much time. So I think that's a play for anybody going. I would definitely look at your sunrise sunset calendars and making sense of that if it's going to benefit you.
Yeah, because like in Ohio, it's getting dark at 5, and the sun won't come up till 7. And I'm just sitting here for 14 hours by myself, just like, all
Yep,
right, well, I guess I'll just wait for tomorrow.
totally, totally. So what other gear? I guess everybody likes gear, but have you played around with gear and kind of perfected the system over the past few years from going out west your first time to like if you were to go out next year, like what's been different
Like
for
for
you or
Western
what would
gear.
you? just period. I'm sure you've messed around with stuff, but yeah, I guess if you're going out to let's say you went out to Nebraska or you were going out to Colorado next year, like have you kind of evolved a system a little bit of gear?
My big thing would be your optics and your tripods. That's something I need. I definitely am going to lean into getting a better system for. I don't think people really appreciate stability. You think you're going to go out there and hold your binoculars and look for game. It's actually
Mm-hmm.
exhausting. Not just your eyes, but even like you put your
Your
hands in your
shoulders are
elbows.
burning.
Yeah, and it's super unnecessary because if you get the tripod, you can get one that holds your rifle too. Like that
Yep.
would be ideal is having a tall tripod that you can pinch your rifle into and also throw an adapter on for your spotting scope and your binoculars. I think is having that would be my number one piece of gear for going back out west is having an ability to have stable optics
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, if you're hunting whitetails even at 60 yards in brush, it's really hard to see that brown move through the cover, right? Now, if you're trying to look at a mule deer 300 yards out with wind moving the brush, and you think you're going to do that with an unstable binocular, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe, but you're going to lose them pretty easy.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I was just going back and forth with a client. We were talking about the SIG stabilization binoculars. I don't know if you've seen those at all,
Yeah, I've
but
seen those.
they're like kind of like the new craze. And I have I have the 10x30s and I have the 16x40s, and now they have like a newer version that they just released that's like 16x50s, and I think they even have a 12x50 now or whatever the case is. But what I was telling them was I took those 16s out west 2 years ago, and I would say I was not impressed with their like low light performance, but you gain the opportunity of like if you're hiking around and you want to put them up, like it's stable, and that's such a
Hmm.
huge benefit for it. And I actually started using those things, which are super tiny, but I used them all last year and I used them all this year for whitetail here, and it's amazing what you see anywhere because you're not like Michigan hunting, like you don't have a tripod and you're sitting on the ground, like you're in a saddle or maybe you're walking around and you're going to pop those things up. But I was seeing deer where I probably would have never seen them had I had non-stabilized binoculars, and it was wild. Like I would catch a glimpse of a deer moving off because it might have seen me or heard me, and I'm like, dang, there was a deer. I would have never known there was a deer, but I saw it because it was stable. So out west, I always have a tripod. So I feel like there is definitely a method to the madness of that. I think you're spot on. I think it's huge.
And I have another kind of, I guess not hot take, but I think the future of Western hunting, another critical piece of gear is going to be saddle hunting. I think people are sleeping on the saddle, but as you get more pressure in these areas and there's more people moving around, pushing these animals around, they're in thicker cover. Of course, maybe they'll reduce tags or whatever. But if you're going to try to kill early season elk or even early season mule deer, honestly, not even early season, it could be late season somewhere with not that much water.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to have a really light one stick setup and hike into a wallow and sit on them. I know people are, you go out west to see country, so that's why it does kind of suck to sit here in this dark timber on this like pea scented hole all day. But I do think out west, I think a lot of those mobile climbing setups are going to become a little more prominent in the future. There's so many opportunities to use them that I feel like people just haven't gotten into yet.
Yep.
Watering holes being a big one.
Well, yes, I got a buddy of mine. He lives in Idaho, but he has a spot that he'll never share with another soul. But it's a uprooted tree that has become like the tree's still there, but now it's a wallow. So the past like 4 or 5 seasons, it's literally a mud pit, and he literally has a tree stand that he put up there, and he hunts out of it every year. And 4 out of the last 5 years, he's killed a giant bull out of there.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, it's whitetail hunting for elk, but he's like, there's no point in me going and running around this mountain when I know like they're gonna hit
Hmm.
this. He's got trail cameras out, the whole deal. I mean, literally whitetail hunts it. It's hilarious. But
Yeah.
2 years ago he shot like a 340 bull freaking sitting over a puddle. It worked, and I'm like, you're not. Who cares? Like you got the job done, and it makes sense, and it's thick. When you're hunting that thick stuff, like you're never going to see that animal glassing. It's just not going to happen.
Hmm.
So
No, definitely. And then people, I guess, like, the truth is he's a local too, though, so it is a little easier to do that if you live there. But like I said, I think a lot of it's going to come down to just how popular Western hunting is getting. That I think sitting tight is going to become a lot better of a tactic than it used to be in some areas. Just because I've walked around out west hunting and there's, oh, there's a guy over here, there's a guy over here. It's like, well, I'm probably just pushing these people deer the whole day, walking around.
Yep.
So,
Well, I mean that I would say that's pretty consistent advice that I've given people is like find a spot and just sit down. Because if you're especially if you're hunting, I'll use over the counter Colorado as an example, but there's plenty of other places that have plenty of tags where you have a bunch of people in the field, but that's exactly what happens. Like people are constantly moving around, they're pushing stuff, so you don't know if you're sitting there for hour 1 and hour 2 all of a sudden something busts out cuz like I mean, I've had success from it, so I speak for it, but like I remember this was actually in Colorado. It was an over the counter hunt and I ended up drawing a deer tag for it. And these guys, they're just running around the mountain and a ton of road hunters and the whole deal. And I was like, you know what? I'm just literally going to go up to this peak. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to glass. And literally within like half an hour, these guys are driving by these areas and deer are just kind of flying out. And I end up shooting a mule deer because the pressure just moved them to me.
hmm
And I'm like, it's almost like just the patience game ends up vetting out way better for you than all the hiking and all the
hmm
backcountry stuff. Sometimes it's just sit down.
yeah,
For anybody that thinks you can't do it, you can. It's not always 10 miles of backcountry like you see on YouTube all day long.
yeah. I mean, if you're a whitetail hunter, you're already built for it. Just sit down,
Totally.
get some snacks, and just wait it out.
Yeah, I love it. So, what's your future like as far as like where you're gonna hunt? Like, where are you applying? What are your tag plans and all that jazz?
So I've backed off on the West for a couple years, basically to get my plan established. You don't have to do this. There's over-the-counter opportunities, but I basically have selected Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and I also apply to Kansas, Iowa, South Dakota, Maine, Vermont. I said Iowa, basically a couple
Yep.
whitetail states, but taking them out of the equation. My main three are Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. And I kind of want to poke around with Utah, Oregon, and Washington, seem interesting. But again, I'm on a conservation person's
Yep.
budget. I get it. But like the idea is, if I build up 5 points in all three, in two of those states, 3 points in Montana, because you have to burn them at three, I could go elk hunting 1 year in Colorado on 5 points, burn that. I'll rotate up to Montana, burn those three the next year, rotate down to Wyoming. I'm at 7 points now for three different species:
Mm-hmm.
elk, mule deer, pick one. All right, by the time I'm done with those, I can rotate back down to Colorado, hunt the other species I didn't hunt before: mule deer, elk, or antelope.
Yep.
Boom, by the time that's over, I have enough points where I can either dip back into Wyoming or dip into Montana, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
back to the same amount of points almost, or enough to draw a decent unit. I'm never going to be the guy chasing trophy units. I'm never going to chase 10-point units, 15-point units. I'll never catch them. Hot take. Like, there's units that I will just never hunt in my lifetime because I'm never going to catch up with the point creep.
Sure.
So I'm just accepting that 5 points or less units, maybe six or seven sometimes, is the name of the game. And I set my system up so I can just rotate through these three states. And this doesn't include at all the fact that some of those years I'll be in South Dakota, I'll be in Kansas, I'll be in Oklahoma, I'll be
Mm-hmm.
doing something else anyway. And then I'm probably eventually going to dip into Washington. They have some over the counter opportunities there. I've been looking at Idaho if I could ever get in line early enough, which I don't know, and then Arizona, things like
Yeah.
that. But if you have three states and you make them your main rotation, you can basically inevitably draw a tag
Yeah.
at some point.
No, I think what you just said is spot on. I mean, it's I always look at 3 states as kind of the minimum and 5 or more if you're really trying to be aggressive in a kind of a strategy. It's the same deal. I talk about that rotation that you were just talking about because it's like by the time you start building up those points, now you start taking one over the other, and you're spot on, man. I love it. I love it.
hmm
Yeah, you're gonna have a really good rotation here. How many points are you in Montana now?
I just bought my third last week because they're about to close for the year. You can buy it till the end of the
Yep.
year. I wonder if that was unwise now because I'm not going next year, and I know I can carry them for 2 years. I should have just waited to buy it next year because I lost myself a year. But I'm kind of forcing myself to go elk hunting in Montana in 2026, which I'm not
Okay.
complaining. I'll happily do that. So I'm at three in Montana, and I think I'm at four in Wyoming, and three in Colorado across all the species. And I bought one moose point in Colorado, which was a bad idea. I'm never gonna draw that either.
You'd be surprised, because I always talk about Montana and Idaho, or I'm sorry, Idaho or Colorado being like somewhat better opportunities for moose. Idaho
Hmm.
definitely,
Yeah,
but every year, man, there's people that draw that have like it's their first opportunity in that hybrid draw where they draw with their first year. So you never know.
no,
So do
definitely.
you have 1 point for moose, or you have the 3 points plus one?
I just have the one for Colorado, so you can't even draw until you get three. And I'm looking at Idaho. You're right, because I've looked into their moose. I should try to get one of those tags. I drew a Maine moose tag on a 1% draw,
Mm.
and
Maine's a great opportunity to get a moose tag. So
yeah, it's probably sleeper. I should probably stop talking about it, but
no, I mean it
it
is
is it's a good
that
opportunity.
one I'm in all the time. You know,
Yep.
the interesting part in the Northeast though is the heavy tick kill. You
Hmm.
know, that's always kind of an anomaly in like New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine kind of area over there. I know there's even been closures and stuff like that just because even the survival rates of those fawns was rough.
Yep.
So, or calves, shall I say? But yeah, that's cool. I like hitting on the tag stuff just because I'm always curious what people are one applying and kind of what the method of the madness is because I
Hmm.
obviously I have my own systems with stuff, but it's cool. I applaud you for how you're doing it. I think you're doing a great job with it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I definitely try to take advantage of. If you want to do this stuff, like you got to do it. I think a lot of people have this idea, like I'll start building points eventually, but like you get 1 point a year.
Yep.
You know, so
Well, and you hit on it. I think this will be kind of a good one for folks, but a lot of states, if they're not on a true preference point system, they'll do a bonus point system, but those bonus point systems can also work in where they have their top point holders for whatever reason, and they'll draw a section of that kind of pool of tags, but you'll never catch that. Like
hmm.
Utah's a good example I was looking at earlier today for a client. Like unless you have like 20 points, like you're not guaranteed a tag on. You want to go rifle hunt a limited unit, it ain't gonna happen. Like you're gonna draw that from however many points maybe you have 5, 6, 7 points, but you're gonna draw it on a random.
Hmm.
So like you got to get those points for additional opportunities. But if you plan on being the top point holder, you're probably never going to catch the point creep. So you just got to have
Yeah.
that in mind. So cool, man. Well, any kind of final advice for folks looking to hop states like you are, from what you've learned over the years?
Yeah, I mean, my advice would be is just go do it is number one. I know everybody says that, but you really do. If you want to do it, you can always talk about someday when the money's better, whatever's better. You just need to just make the commitment and do what you got to do in your life to make it possible and make it happen. And the second thing I would say is, there's all these famous places people want to go. You talk about whatever state, whatever unit. You really take a second look around. We have 50 states. There's hunting in every single one of them, and there's opportunities in every single. So just maybe think outside the box and do something different than what you're doing. Maybe you're not going to go hunt. You're not going to kill an elk in Northwest Colorado in some premium unit with your rifle, but maybe there's some mountain range in the south that you never thought about hunting, and you can go kill a 140 class deer on public land. You have, or maybe you go kill a 90-inch deer on public land. And you still have a great adventure. I just
Mm,
think, just go and do it, no matter where it is, no matter what. As long as it's different than what you're doing, just take the chance, take the opportunity. Don't just wait for don't wait for someday, because the way things are going, there might not be a someday where tags are so easy to get.
yeah, no, that's well said. That's well said. Well, you heard it, folks. Gideon himself, the gentleman that hops around state to state here across state lines. I I love it. I just like your style, man. It just you're almost like off the cusp, off the whim. Just go do it and see where it lands. And I know you talk about missed opportunities, but you've also had a lot of opportunities, which is pretty cool. So I think you're figuring it out too, which is awesome.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Thanks for coming on. With that said, how do people get a hold of you, follow you, all that jazz?
So really, my only presence is on Instagram, which you can follow me at public_land_Gideon, Gideon. Give me a follow on there, and I share lots of stories. I post photos, of my hunts and everything. I haven't got into the YouTube thing yet, but maybe eventually. But go ahead and give me a follow on there, and yeah, you can see what's going on.
Yeah, I'll echo on that aspect. I think you do a great job on your stories. They're fun to watch, and you always have something going on, and I don't know, there's something to it. It's fun to see what you got going along. So give him a follow for sure. I think you're definitely gonna enjoy that. I'll give you guys my 2 second spiel here as well. But if you're looking to get into tag applications or hunt planning, this is definitely the time to do it, as it's tag application season here coming at the end of the year. So with that, go ahead and follow along on Instagram at East to West Hunts. That is East, the number 2, West Hunts. You can also go and book a free consultation or get a hold of me on www.easttowesthunts.com. Go hit that free consultation or contact us button and send me an email. Let me know what you're thinking, and we could see if we could help you out with anything going out on any adventures. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Remember to scout, hunt, and repeat. Thanks.